It's not an act if he's actually doing these things, Eleanor replied. And there's something else. Kevin overheard our conversation about the restaurant inspections. He knows we're targeting Jack's business, not just his home barbecues. So, the boy should mind his own business. He's 14, Martin, and he idolizes Jack Harmon. Do you know what my son said to me this morning? He said, "Mom, are we the bad guys in this story?" Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. I didn't have a good answer for him. Martin was silent for a moment. It doesn't matter. The fine stands, and once the state inspectors find violations at his restaurants, which they will because I'll make sure of it, Jack Harmon will have bigger problems than an HOA dispute. But the inspection never happened. That Monday morning, Martin's college roommate called to inform him that the planned inspection had been canceled. Something about a conflict of interest complaint filed by a prominent legal firm. Meanwhile, preparations for the Meadowbrook Community Festival were proceeding at lightning speed. Jack had mobilized his restaurant network, securing commitments from 20 top pitmasters to participate. Local businesses, sensing an opportunity for positive publicity, were lining up to sponsor. Most surprising to Jack was the number of Meadowbrook residents who had volunteered to help, including Eleanor Winters, who had approached him somewhat sheepishly after the neighborhood meeting. I still think the HOA serves an important purpose, she told him. But $70,000 is excessive, and Kevin would never forgive me if I didn't support this. Martin, however, wasn't giving up. If he couldn't stop the festival, through official channels he would find another way. He contacted the 3 HOA board members who hadn't attended Jack's meeting and called an emergency session. We need to act decisively, he told them. The Harmons are undermining the very foundation of our community standards. I propose we increase the fine to $100,000 and place a lien on their property if they refuse to pay. But his proposal was met with unexpected resistance. I don't think that's wise, Martin, said Gerald Thompson, normally his most dependable supporter. The community seems pretty solidly behind Jack on this one. My wife says the festival already has 15 corporate sponsors and more than 1,000 RSVPs on Facebook. So we just surrender? Martin asked incredulously. No, we negotiate, Gerald replied. This is becoming a PR disaster. If we increase the fine now, we'll look vindictive. Martin stormed out of the meeting, more determined than ever to stop Jack Harmon. There was one card he hadn't played yet, the true reason for his vendetta. The day of the festival dawned bright and clear. The main street running through Meadowbrook Estates had been transformed. Smokers and grills lined both sides of the road. Colorful tents housed local businesses and community organizations. A stage had been set up in the park, where local bands would perform throughout the day. Jack surveyed the scene with satisfaction. Not bad for 3 weeks of planning, he said to Diane. You've created a monster, she laughed, gesturing at the crowds already forming. I heard they're expecting 3,000 people. Good thing we ordered extra food, Jack replied, then frowned as he spotted a familiar figure marching purposefully toward them. Incoming, Martin at 2 o'clock. Martin Graves looked like a man on a mission. Harmon, he said curtly. A word? In private. Jack shrugged. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here. Fine, Martin snapped. I know what you did 20 years ago. Jack looked genuinely confused. What are you talking about? The food poisoning incident at the culinary school final. I know you tampered with my dish. Jack stared at him, then burst out laughing. That's what this is about? You think I poisoned your coq au vin? Martin, half the judges got sick, including the dean, who happened to be my biggest supporter. Why would I sabotage my own chances? To make it look like an accident, Martin hissed. You've been one step ahead of me our entire careers, and I'm sick of it. This isn't about barbecue at all, is it? Jack said slowly. It's about you being unable to let go of the past. Martin, I never sabotaged you. The investigation found that you left the sauce out too long before serving. It was just bad luck. Liar! Martin shouted, drawing the attention of nearby festival goers. You ruined my career. You ruined your own career, Jack replied calmly. I offered you a job. After graduation, remember? Head chef at my first restaurant. You turned it down because you said barbecue was beneath you. Martin's face went pale. You're making that up. Am I? Check your email archives, May 15, 2004. I still have the offer letter I sent you." As they argued, a small crowd had gathered, including several HOA board members who were hearing this story for the first time. "Martin," Eleanor said gently, "is this true? Is this whole barbecue crusade because of a 20-year-old culinary school rivalry?" Before Martin could respond, Mrs. Abernathy pushed through the crowd, a manila envelope in her hand. "I think everyone should see this," she announced, pulling out a stack of papers. "These are the minutes from every HOA meeting for the past 7 years. I've highlighted every instance where Martin pushed for increasingly restrictive regulations, targeting specific residents, always after they opposed him on something." Martin lunged for the papers, but Jack intercepted him. "That's enough, Martin. It's over." By now, Councilwoman Diaz had joined the group. "Mr. Graves, I'm disturbed by what I'm hearing. Using HOA authority to pursue personal vendettas raises serious legal and ethical questions." Martin looked around wildly, seeing nothing but disapproving faces. "This isn't over, Harmon," he snarled, then turned and stormed away. The festival proceeded without further incident. By all measures, it was a spectacular success. The food was incredible, the music energetic, and the community spirit palpable. The event raised over $30,000 for the park renovation and food bank. But the real transformation was in Meadowbrook Estates itself. In the weeks that followed, the newly formed Neighborhood Advocacy Committee worked with the HOA board, minus Martin Graves, who had resigned, to revise community guidelines. The draconian fine system was replaced with a more reasonable structure. The ban on barbecues was lifted entirely. As for Jack, he had one more surprise in store. Using the connections he'd made during the festival, he launched a new business, Backyard BBQ Kits, complete with small, eco-friendly smokers designed specifically for suburban use. At the launch party, held in the newly renovated Meadowbrook Park, Jack announced that for every kit sold, one would be donated to a food-insecure family. And then, to the delight of the gathered community, he unveiled the first recipients. Every's household in Meadowbrook Estates, including a special delivery to Martin Graves, who had been conspicuously absent from neighborhood events. The note attached to Martin's gift read simply, "It's never too late to start fresh. Dinner at my place next Friday?" Jack. Whether Martin would accept the olive branch remained to be seen. But as the smell of barbecue once again wafted through Meadowbrook Estates the following Friday, now from dozens of backyards instead of just one, Jack Harmon knew he had accomplished something more meaningful than winning a petty feud. He had given his community a taste of freedom, and it smelled delicious. "You advocated for your uncle's business?" Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "That was actually very thoughtful of you." Kevin seized the opening. "Mr. Harmon's really nice, Mom, and his daughter Zoe helps tutor kids at the library. They're good people. I don't understand why the HOA is being so hard on them." Eleanor sighed. "It's complicated, Kevin. There are community standards that need to be maintained, property values to consider." But Kevin had overheard enough conversations between his mother and Martin to know that it was very personal indeed. He made a decision. Once, in his room, he messaged Zoe Harmon on Instagram. "Hi Zoe, you don't know me, but I'm Kevin Winters. My mom is on the HOA board. I heard about what they're doing to your family, and it's not right. I also overheard your dad talking about a festival plan, and I think my mom and Mr. Graves already know about it. They're planning something else too. Something about inspections at your dad's restaurants next week. I want to help." The next morning, Jack arrived at his flagship restaurant to find his staff in unusual form. Miguel was directing everyone, with military precision, and every surface in the kitchen gleamed. "What's going on?" Jack asked. Miguel gave him a significant look. "Zoe didn't tell you? We got a tip last night. State environmental inspectors are planning to hit all our locations next week. Supposed to be a surprise inspection." Jack's expression darkened. "This is Graves. Has to be." Some kid whose mom is on the HOA board messaged Zoe. Apparently, he overheard them planning it. "Kevin Winters," Jack said. "Well, I'll be damned." The kid also said they know about the festival plan. Jack considered this new information. "That changes the timeline, but not the plan. We need to move faster." He pulled out his phone and dialed Rebecca. "Beck, we need those permits yesterday. Graves is escalating. He's sicking state inspectors on my restaurants next week. That's crossing a line, Rebecca replied, her voice hardening. Using state resources for a personal vendetta? That's potential abuse of power. We need to move faster on the festival. They know we're planning something. Actually, this might work in our favor. If they're anticipating the festival, they won't see the legal counteroffensive coming. I've already drafted a cease and desist letter challenging the ecological claims. I'm also filing a public records request for all communications between Martin Graves and any state environmental officials. That Friday, instead of firing up his smoker as usual, Jack did something unexpected. He walked door to door throughout Meadowbrook Estates, personally inviting every household to a neighborhood meeting at his house the following day. When Martin opened his door to find Jack standing there with a friendly smile, he nearly slammed it shut again. "What do you want, Harmon?" Martin asked, coldly. "Just extending a neighborly invitation," Jack replied, holding out a handwritten card. "Community meeting at my place tomorrow. We're discussing the future of Meadowbrook Estates." After inviting half the neighborhood, Jack drove to the smallest house in Meadowbrook, a modest bungalow occupied by Mrs. Abernathy, the 85-year-old, former schoolteacher who had lived there since before the development had even been built. Mrs. Abernathy was the neighborhood's institutional memory, and the only resident exempt from HOA rules due to a grandfather clause. She was also the owner of 2 acres of undeveloped land adjacent to the neighborhood park, land that the HOA had been trying to purchase for years. "Jack Harmon," she smiled as she opened the door. "I've been missing my Friday barbecue smell. Where's my usual delivery?" Every Friday for 8 years, Jack had delivered a plate of barbecue to Mrs. Abernathy, a tradition that had begun when she'd mentioned in passing how much she enjoyed the smell. "That's actually why I'm here," Jack said. "We've run into a bit of trouble with the HOA about our Friday tradition. I was hoping I might get your advice." She gestured him inside. Come in, come in. I've been waiting for someone to finally stand up to that dreadful Martin Graves. Tell me everything." By the time he left an hour later, they had formed an alliance that would shock the entire community. By Saturday afternoon, Jack's backyard was filled with neighbors, more than had gathered in one place in Meadowbrook Estates in years. Martin was conspicuously absent, though Eleanor had arrived, looking uncomfortable but curious. Most surprising was the appearance of Kevin, who stood nervously at the edges, occasionally glancing at his mother. Jack moved to the center of the patio and whistled loudly. The crowd gradually quieted. "Thanks for coming, everyone," he began. "Most of you received a flyer from the HOA this week about environmental concerns regarding backyard cooking. What the flyer didn't mention is that my family has been fined $70,000 for our Friday barbecues." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. "This isn't just about barbecue," Jack continued. "It's about what kind of community we want to live in. One where neighbors can share traditions, build relationships, enjoy their properties within reasonable limits, or one where an increasingly restrictive HOA dictates our daily lives." Eleanor stepped forward. "That's not fair, Jack. The HOA protects property values and maintains standards." "Nobody's arguing against reasonable guidelines, Eleanor," Jack replied evenly. "But $70,000 for cooking dinner once a week? How is that reasonable? And where does it stop? Today it's barbecue. Tomorrow it might be garden vegetables that grow too tall, or kids playing too loudly." "So what are you proposing?" asked David Goldstein, whose family had been fined for using a clothesline the previous summer. "3 things, Jack said. First, we're organizing a community festival right here in Meadowbrook. Food, music, local businesses, and all proceeds going to renovate the neighborhood park and support the Franklin Street Community Garden Food Security Initiative." This announcement was met with scattered applause. Second, we're forming a neighborhood advocacy committee to review HOA policies and propose reforms. If enough of us band together, we can actually change the rules we live under. More enthusiastic response, especially from those who had previously run afoul of HOA regulations. And third, Jack paused, glancing at Mrs. Abernathy, who gave him a slight nod. "We're announcing the creation of the Meadowbrook Community Land Trust, beginning with Mrs. Abernathy's 2 acres by the park, which will be permanently protected from development and maintained as community green space." This announcement caused a genuine stir. Everyone knew that developers had been eyeing that land for years. Eleanor looked stunned. "Mrs. Abernathy, you're giving away your land? That property is worth a fortune." Mrs. Abernathy rose slowly to her feet, her diminutive stature belying her commanding presence. "I'm not giving it away, dear. I'm ensuring it serves the community, as my late husband and I always intended. The HOA has made 3 offers for that land, all rejected because your plans always involve development. This community needs green space more than it needs another row of townhomes." To everyone's surprise, Councilwoman Diaz stood up from where she'd been sitting next to Mrs. Abernathy. "As your representative on the City Council, I fully support these initiatives. The festival already has preliminary approval, pending final permits which my office will expedite." By the end of the meeting, almost every neighbor present had signed up for either the Festival Planning Committee or the HOA Reform Group. The tide was turning. Martin Graves was livid when he learned about the meeting. "They can't just create a land trust and organize a festival without HOA approval," he sputtered to Eleanor on the phone. "Actually, they can," Eleanor replied, her voice oddly subdued. Rebecca Harmon outlined the legal case quite clearly at the meeting. The streets are public property. With city permits, they can absolutely hold a festival. And Mrs. Abernathy's land has never been subject to HOA jurisdiction. "Whose side are you on, Eleanor?" Martin asked sharply. There was a pause. "I'm starting to wonder that myself, Martin. Kevin told me some interesting things about Jack Harmon yesterday. Did you know he's been delivering free barbecue to Mrs. Abernathy every Friday for 8 years? Or that he mentors high school students interested in culinary careers?" "Don't tell me you're falling for his community hero act," Martin sneered. The first thing Jack Harmon noticed when the HOA notice landed on his kitchen counter was the official red stamp. Violation. The second thing was the absurd figure at the bottom. $70,000. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, scanning the letter again. His fingers gripped the paper so tightly it crinkled. "Environmental nuisance. Persistent aromatic pollution. Violation of community ecological standards." His wife Diane peered over his shoulder, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. $70,000? For what? Cooking? "Apparently our Friday barbecues are destroying the ecological balance of Meadowbrook Estates," Jack said, his voice dangerously quiet. He dropped the notice and looked through the kitchen window at his prized smoker, a custom-built Texas-style offset that had taken him years to perfect. Their teenage daughter Zoe snatched up the notice. "Wait, they can't actually do this, can they? We've been doing Friday barbecues since before I was born." Jack wasn't just any weekend griller. As the owner of Smoke and Fire, the most acclaimed barbecue restaurant chain in Illinois, smoking meat was his livelihood, his art form. And now some HOA paper pusher was telling him his family tradition was an ecological crime? "Call Mom," Zoe said. "She'll sue them into the next century." Diane was already texting Jack's sister Rebecca, one of Chicago's top litigation attorneys. "But you know how these HOA contracts work. They have a lot of power." Jack was still staring out the window, but his expression had transformed. The initial shock had morphed into something else, a gleam in his eye that Diane recognized all too well. It was the same look he'd had when a food critic called his brisket pedestrian 10 years ago, right before he launched his now famous Midnight Smoke event that put his restaurant on the national map. "They want to talk about ecological impact?" Jack said, turning to face his family with a dangerous smile. "I think it's time we showed Meadowbrook Estates what impact really looks like." Martin Graves adjusted his paisley bow tie in the mirror. He could smell it again, that infuriating odor of hickory smoke and cooking meat wafting through his open window. Every Friday without fail. "Patricia," he called to his wife, "close all the windows on the east side, please. The Neanderthal is at it again." Martin had spent 7 years clawing his way to the presidency of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA. 7 years of carefully documenting infractions, building alliances, and strategically removing opponents. 20 years ago, he and Jack had been the top 2 students at the Culinary Institute of America. Martin's delicate French cuisine against Jack's rustic American barbecue. The final showcase should have been Martin's moment of triumph, until food poisoning struck half the judges after sampling his coq au vin. The investigation cleared him of wrongdoing, But Jack walked away with top honors while Martin's career in fine dining evaporated overnight. Now, Jack was a barbecue magnate with restaurants across 3 states, while Martin taught cooking classes at the community college and ruled over Meadowbrook with an iron fist disguised in velvet gloves. His phone buzzed. It was Eleanor Winters, the HOA treasurer, and his most reliable ally. "Did he get it?" she asked without preamble. "The courier delivered it this afternoon," Martin replied, a smile curling his thin lips. "I made sure it arrived just before his precious weekly ritual. 70,000 is steep, Martin. The board only approved up to 20. The rest is for my administrative fees. Don't worry, Eleanor. He'll contest it. We'll negotiate down to 20 as planned. And the Harmons' barbecue days will be finished." Neither of them suspected that Jack Harmon's response would be anything other than the usual angry letters and eventual capitulation that followed most HOA enforcement actions. They were wrong. "I need you to cancel your weekend plans," Jack said, pacing the length of his kitchen while on the phone with his restaurant manager, Miguel. "We're going to war?" Miguel sighed. "What did Zoe do this time?" "Not that kind of war. HOA war. They've fined me 70 grand for our Friday barbecues. Some ecological balance bullshit. That's insane. You've been doing those forever." "Exactly. Remember that community festival concept we sketched out last year? The one the city permits office shut down? The Smoke Signal Festival? Yeah, but they said the downtown location would cause too much." Miguel paused. Oh no, Jack, you're not thinking. I'm not just thinking it. We're doing it. Right here in Meadowbrook Estates. Every restaurant in our network, every pitmaster. I know, all converging on this neighborhood. Diane watched with growing concern. "Jack, honey, maybe we should talk to Rebecca first. See what legal options we have?" Jack covered the phone. "This isn't about legal options anymore, Di. This is about standing our ground. They're not just attacking our barbecue. They're attacking our way of life." Zoe rolled her eyes. "Dad, it's just grilling meat, not the Constitution." "It's the principle," Jack insisted. "Today it's barbecue. Tomorrow it'll be what color you can paint your bedroom, or what kind of plants you can grow." What Jack didn't realize was that someone else was listening to his conversation. 14-year-old Kevin Winters, Eleanor's son, who was cutting through their yard when he'd heard Jack's raised voice. Kevin had always admired Jack. Unlike most adults in Meadowbrook, Jack never treated him like a nuisance. Once, when Kevin had shown interest in cooking, Jack had even given him a tour of his restaurant kitchen. Kevin slipped away, conflicted, about what to do with the information he'd just overheard. Rebecca's legal offices occupied the 23rd floor of a downtown Chicago skyscraper. She was staring incredulously at the HOA violation notice. "This is the most blatant abuse of HOA authority I've seen in years," she told Jack over the phone, "and I sued 3 HOAs last year alone." "So we can fight it?" Jack asked. "We can, but that's playing by their rules," Rebecca replied. "These battles get ugly and take forever. Even when you win, you lose. The legal fees, the time wasted, the neighbor relationships destroyed. So what's your advice? Roll over and take it?" Rebecca smiled. "When did you ever know me to suggest rolling over? No, I think your festival idea is brilliant, but we need to be smarter about it. Make it not just a protest, but a community healing event. Something so positive that opposing it makes the HOA look like the villains." "I'm listening." "You remember how Martin tried to get the Franklin Street Community Garden shut down last year? Claimed it was improperly zoned?" "Yeah, the same garden that donates fresh produce to the food bank." "Exactly. So what if your festival isn't just about barbecue, but about food security? Partner with the community garden, donate proceeds to both the park renovation and the food bank. Make it about community resilience." Jack was quiet for a moment. "You're good at this, Beck. That's why I bill $800 an hour," she laughed. "But here's the real kicker. I happen to know that 3 members of the city council are up for re-election this fall. A festival that combines small business promotion, food security, and community space improvement? That's political gold." What neither Jack nor Rebecca knew was that Martin had connections of his own. As soon as the HOA notice had been delivered, he'd called his college roommate, now an environmental compliance officer with the state. A surprise inspection of Jack's restaurant properties was now scheduled for the following week. Kevin Winters sat at the dinner table pushing his food around his plate while his mother chatted. "And then Martin assured me that this will finally put an end to those awful Friday smoke fests," Eleanor was saying. Kevin frowned. "I like the smell. Mr. Harmon gave me some of his brisket once. It was the best thing I've ever eaten." Eleanor's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "When did Jack Harmon give you food?" "Last year when I was working on that science project about cooking methods. He showed me his whole restaurant kitchen." "Kevin, you never told me about this. You know how I feel about that man. Because of Uncle John's honey? That wasn't Mr. Harmon's fault. His purchasing manager said they already had a contract with another supplier." Eleanor put down her fork. "How do you know what his purchasing manager said?" Kevin realized too late that he'd said too much. I asked him about it when I was there." "You advocated for your uncle's business?" Eleanor's expression softened slightly. "That was actually very thoughtful of you." Kevin seized the opening. "Mr. Harmon's really nice, Mom. And his daughter Zoe helps tutor kids at the library. They're good people. I don't understand why the HOA is being so hard on them." Eleanor sighed. "It's complicated, Kevin. There are community standards that need to be maintained, property values to consider." But Kevin had overheard enough conversations between his mother and Martin to know that it was very personal indeed. He made a decision.